Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are looking at something absolutely crucial, the decision-making framework used by elite CEOs. We're going to break down exactly how titans of industry make those massive, high-stakes decisions under extreme uncertainty. If you've ever wondered how the best in the world consistently navigate risk, figure out where to put their resources, and spot these hidden opportunities that everyone else totally misses, well, you are in the exact right place. We are going to decode the mental models of the elite so you can start applying them to your own work right away. Let's dive in.
So, to understand how the elite think, we actually need to look at how most people fail. Why do average managers really struggle when the pressure is on? It fundamentally comes down to how our brains are wired to process choices. You see, most people base their decisions on what they want right now. They prioritize immediate comfort, instant satisfaction, or just avoiding short-term pain. But they do this at a severe expense to their long-term results. Okay, let's dive into this contrast because it's a huge deal. The order of consequences. The average manager is completely trapped in first-order thinking. For example, let's say you avoid a tough conversation with a toxic employee. That brings the immediate comfort of dodging conflict, right? That's a first-order win. But elite CEOs, they focus on second- and third-order consequences. They know that avoiding that conversation means your top performers are eventually going to quit, which destroys team morale and completely tanks revenue down the line. Elite thinkers are literally always playing 5 steps ahead, and they are totally willing to endure short-term discomfort for massive, compounding long-term growth.
So here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with 1, the decision-making trap, then move to 2, frameworks of elite CEOs, 3, mastering risk and uncertainty, 4, the capital allocation edge, 5, bulletproof your judgment, and finally, 6, build your decision system.
Starting with part 1, the decision-making trap, breaking the cycle. Because before we can think like the elite, we really have to identify these hidden cognitive traps that keep us stuck. Billionaire investor Ray Dalio absolutely hits the nail on the head here. He points out that the 2 biggest barriers to good decision-making are our ego and our blind spots. When we just seize on the very first option that presents itself, especially when it confirms what we already believe, we are inviting disaster. Dalio warns that this failure to look past the immediate horizon is exactly what causes painfully bad decisions in business.
And you know what else is a massive trap? Status quo bias. In large organizations, this often morphs into something Jeff Bezos warns us about, which he calls process as proxy. This is when doing the process right actually becomes more important than the outcome itself. People just keep escalating their commitment to the old way of doing things, and they completely forget why the process was even created in the first place.
Which brings us to part 2, frameworks of elite CEOs, first principles and mental models. How do we break free from these traps? Well, we have to deconstruct the actual frameworks used by world-class leaders to reframe problems and shatter the status quo.
The most powerful tool for this is first principles thinking. It's really a simple 3-part discipline. First, you break down the problem by identifying all your inherited assumptions. Second, you examine the core. Ask yourself, are these beliefs actually true today? And finally, rebuild smart. You design fresh solutions from those fundamental truths upward. It's kind of like taking a giant puzzle completely apart just so you can build a better picture.
Just think about SpaceX. Most aerospace companies operated under the massive assumption that rockets were inherently expensive, $60 million disposable assets. But Elon Musk applied first principles. He literally broke it down to the raw materials, aerospace-grade aluminum, titanium, copper. And he realized those raw materials were only a tiny fraction of the cost. By stripping away the legacy assumption that rockets had to be disposable, SpaceX entirely revolutionized the business model by creating reusable rockets. Incredible, right?
Another absolute game changer comes from Jeff Bezos, who categorizes decisions as Type 1 or Type 2. Type 1 decisions are one-way doors. They are totally irreversible and require slow, highly methodical thinking. But Type 2 decisions are two-way doors. They're reversible and should be made quickly. The struggle for average managers is that they treat literally every choice like a heavy, one-way door, which just completely kills innovation and speed.
Moving into part 3, mastering risk and uncertainty, speed over perfection. Elite leaders deeply understand that absolute certainty is a total myth. Instead, they prioritize decision velocity. As Bezos points out right here, waiting for 90% certainty means you are moving way too slowly. Speed matters for sure. If you're dealing with a Type 2 two-way door decision, make the call at 70% certainty. Being slow is actually far more expensive than simply making a quick decision, realizing it's wrong, and course-correcting.
Elite CEOs scale their tolerance for failure right alongside their company's growth. And what's really interesting about this slide is how the elite avoid catastrophic failure while moving so fast. They use a mental model called inversion. Instead of asking how to achieve a goal, they ask, how do we most reliably fail at this? Charlie Munger championed this, and Amazon uses a version of it by working backward from the customer. By explicitly focusing on the exact conditions that guarantee failure, you can map out how to navigate right around them. It's not pessimism, you guys. It's asymmetric clarity.
Next up, Part 4, the capital allocation edge, math versus judgment. We're pivoting to the ultimate CEO responsibility here, which is deciding exactly how a company spends its money and resources to create long-term value.
When it comes down to allocating resources, leaders generally face two types of decisions. Math-based decisions are great. The data does all the heavy lifting, and everyone basically agrees. But the biggest, most needle-moving choices, those are judgment-based. They require intuition, they are highly debated, and honestly, they can be super controversial. The crucial takeaway here is that any institution that avoids controversial, judgment-based decisions will severely limit its innovation and long-term value creation.
To make great judgment calls, you absolutely must respect opportunity cost. Every single time you say yes to a project, you are actively saying no to the next best alternative. It's a fundamental truth known by all elite allocators. All capital and all time has this built-in cost.
To put that into perspective, just look at the cost of ignoring that truth in this Morgan Stanley data. Most companies just spend money the exact same way they did the year before. That's the status quo bias we talked about. But as you'll see in the data, aggressively reallocating capital across divisions, unburdened by past inertia, dramatically improves your return on assets. You really have to put resources to their absolute highest use, not just their historical use.
Which leads us to Part 5, bulletproof your judgment, the pre-mortem. We've covered a lot of high-level theory, so how do we bring this down to earth and actually bulletproof our judgment against natural human optimism?
You run a pre-mortem. Let's look at the process used by project management leaders like Asana. Before a big project even launches, you gather the team. Step 1, assume total failure of the project. Literally pretend it's already a complete disaster. Step 2, have everyone independently brainstorm all the reasons for that failure. Step 3, share and compile the risks together. And finally, Step 4, revise the project plan. Imagining failure as a guaranteed reality completely bypasses those awkward social dynamics where people are just too afraid to sound pessimistic.
Then once you have that master list of failures, you must filter them. I highly advise focusing your energy on the top 2 categories: high likelihood risks, like missing a deadline, and high severity risks, like a total system crash. If a risk is pretty easily recoverable, say a minor communication hiccup, don't let it slow your momentum down.
Finally, Part 6, build your decision system, the journal. Let's hand you a tangible tool that you can start using today to track and improve your judgment. This is the Farnam Street Decision Journal. Whenever you make a consequential decision, you write it down. You document the problem, the context, and the alternatives you seriously considered. But here is the real secret weapon. Notice the icons at the bottom. Track the time of day, your physical energy, and your emotional state. Were you super tired, anxious, hangry? Over time, forcing yourself to do this builds the ultimate feedback loop. It'll show you exactly where your blind spots are and when you make your absolute best and worst calls.
So, I want to leave you with a provocative thought to directly challenge you today. Look at a current project you're managing right now, apply first principles, and ask yourself, if we started completely from scratch today, what would we keep and what would we question? Honestly, you might be amazed at the clarity that surfaces. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I will see you next time.